values are fundamentally incongruent. Like if they really thought about their values, then they would just be incongruent. Then all you have to do is talk about those people's values. But
exactly,
when I was talking, about the trade equalization process or whatever, like you don't have to. You're just talking about another hypothetical being. And if I were to say, like, say you had something with like a human head and torso, except for the neck was like elongated so it could like look upright or whatever, but then it had hooves and four stomachs and ate primarily grass and was about as stupid as a cow. Like to say that thing we wouldn't have a problem with a holocaust or an animal holocaust of that thing. That just sounds like something a meat eater already thinks, because it's basically just another animal, right? It's just another thing. And that's why I was saying it sounds like what Timber is saying is like the same thing, because like a lot of times in the name of trade they want to focus on one thing, right? But
okay, I took this to be a completely different criticism. Like Timber, like where we're talking about directionality, the directionality criticism. So Timber's criticism to me was that when I levied a reductio, it was a reductio not in the expansion of the menu direction, using quote unquote sort of an expansion of the menu entailment or question rather than a contraction of the menu entailment. So, for example, with the question, like for example, in the Young example, when I spoke of the cow with all the properties a cow has except for human skin and nipples, I said, well, what about a cow with a piece of human cartilage, right? Wouldn't that not be okay on your view? And then he's like, oh yeah, that would look ridiculous, that the only difference is the cartilage. Now, Timber's objection to me is that, well, all you've accomplished is you've given them a reason to expand their menu, is what he said.
Well, so I don't think anybody would think, like, if a cow had just like, if you're a meat eater and then you just discovered that like 50% of the cows you had human cartilage, that would change any of your.
Well, no, if he says, well, no, but if they say that what is, so remember in the dialectic, what is affirmed in the first place is value is lost. In that conversation, there was an affirmation that value is lost. It is the case that value is lost at the point where a cow has all the properties of a cow and human nipple.
Wait, I guess I don't understand what Young was saying, but that's the same thing that Timber is saying.
No. What Timber is saying, like what Timber would say, is that in that example. So here's the example. The example is, the meat eater affirms that value. It is the case that value was lost, on my view, when the cow has all the properties of a cow and just has human skin and human nipples. At that point, that's the line for which value is lost. And now my question, my reductio that I levied was, well, what if the cow had a piece of human cartilage? In that case, it's entailed on your view that it is not the case that it would be okay to eat.
Wait. I'm not following the whole thing. So,
yeah, sure.
So Timber says that
this is not Timber yet. Timber's objection isn't even here yet. Well, I'm just giving you the example.
Josh, can I just
can I try to clarify your view? Can I try to characterize it?
Okay, go ahead.
I took it that what Timber,
or maybe I can
simple yes or no question, just real quick, Timber. Is any of what Avi was saying relevant to the view that you were forwarding?
No, not at all.
Okay, I didn't think so.
So I think I might be tracking him, and I'll let Timber decide if I'm tracking him. I took it that what he said is, if I give a list of conditions, right, and the list of conditions is both necessary and sufficient, right, then Avi trying to create a reductio by adding another condition, and saying that condition outside of which he's the one that Timber has already given the list is also sufficient if added to the list for them not to eat animals or whatever it is. Then what Timber was saying is, look, if I'm committed that these are indeed the list of necessary and sufficient conditions, then that isn't going to have any force on me. It's not going to convince me by trying to say that I ought to expand the list of what the sufficient conditions would be. And so, is that what you were saying, Timber?
I think that was part of it. I was just that was an important condition, but I think what I was trying to say is that at some point, right, like you're gonna pick out properties that are just gonna be very animal-like. So I don't
very
really.
similar that we
Yeah.
already eat. Right?
Timber,
Yeah,
let
we-
me ask you, when you said expanding the menu, what was the point of that? Like if you're going to say that what I said had nothing to do with what you said, then why did you
No, no.
say it?
Well, the reason I said it is because I wanted to see what happens in the dialectic at that point.
Well, you
And
said the problem is you've just given them a reason to expand the menu. That was your words.
Well, I was just saying that.
But then why would you say that what I've said has
Because I
nothing
wasn't
to do
talking
with
about this simple example. I was just saying that in the dialectic there is some issue here, because all you're
Okay,
going to
so
do.
you have a different. Okay, so you do have a different criticism of what Josh was talking about.
No, I mean I think most of it was the same.
I think he's saying. Let me just real quick. You just tell me whether or not I got it right. You're saying that if there's this hypothetical creature with this extra skin or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, a person then is probably just going to say, yeah, I think that thing's fine to eat. So that insofar as that's concerned, that's just an expansion of the menu, right? That's what you're saying?
You cut out. Can you repeat?
Right, yeah. So the idea there with the hypothetical skin and tits thing, right?
Yeah.
That thing, if a person's not moved to change their view on that thing, then what you're saying is then if that thing were to exist, that's just another thing that they would be willing to eat. And so in that sense, it's an expansion of the menu.
Yeah, or
Right.
at least they would like if all Avi would do in that point is just get me to like maybe consider that to eat. He's not going to really like show any absurdity in what I already eat, right?
Okay,
There's just further. There's just some further, and that's because they have these characteristics that you're already thinking that they have that meet their sufficient conditions for being
Exactly.
eatable, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so
so
I
it
don't
does-
I don't see how that's the same criticism, but okay.
Well, I think okay. So I'm going to see if I can, because it does sound to me, and this is what I found salient yesterday when I at the end of talking to Isaac is he said that he thought it was absurd to eat meat. You know,
Exactly. That was so weird for me because he could just directly say, like, okay, eating animals is against like, the values you already hold, right?
Okay, so that sounds like a conversation you should have with Isaac then, because like when Isaac was having that part of the conversation with you, I was playing video games. Like I can tell you what I would answer, and that's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
And do you think it's absurd? I mean, just take Isaac's definition of absurd. Do you agree with what he was saying about absurdity?
What we mean when we say absurdity, I think there are several ways we could talk about absurdity.
Well, just the
But
way
yeah,
he was talking about it last night, like he had this view that like, oh well, most people are going to think it's crazy, have this attitude towards it's crazy, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, but or even to you, you're gonna have this like, just like complete revulsion towards it, right? So it's absurd to you. That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
yeah, sure.
Right. So in that sense, all right. So there's two ways of using the word as absurd, and it seems clear that just the way meat is now, it only meets one of those definitions, right? Because the most people don't think it's absurd to eat meat. Or most people
Mhm.
don't think in the sense that like, like there's some obvious like disconnect with their values. Most people don't at least consciously believe that. Maybe you can tease that out and make them feel that. Maybe that's what you mean, right? But right now, it's like it's not the case that most people think consciously that there's just something absurd going on there, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like I in my intuition, I think that prima facie, like on its face, that I don't think most people would think that eating meat is absurd. That
And
most
Avi-
people would think.
Sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I don't think that most people would look at eating meat and think that that's an absurd thing.
Because
Wow.
I think, sorry, one quick thing, or just one quick thing. Like my intuitions are like name the trait kind of goes against all my intuitions about like how someone goes vegan. It seems like things like watching slaughterhouse footage, or like seeing like animals like have these kind of social bonds. these are more direct, like kind of ways to convince than just this weird hypothetical, like.
That's an empirical question.
But it seems like there's a direct argument you can just.
Well, no, that's.
But anyway,
that's,
sorry, I'll just give it to Joe.
what you've said is a purely an empirical question. I mean, it's whether what if you're saying, what's going to be more likely to convince people, slaughterhouse footage versus this argument. That, I mean, I don't know how that would, unless you can have some kind of a priori argument for that, which I don't think you can. It's clearly an empirical question.
Right?
Yeah, no,
All that
it's
stuff
just
seems
pointing out
like
it's an
a point.
empirical question.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. It's not really relevant, right? Like that's a good point. So, but the thing is that I do think it's the case that for most people, like when they're going to consider it, if they're not going to be moved by the same types of considerations like slaughterhouse footage and being able to prompt them to be able to consider, like maybe to try to empathize with animals, like if you already have a person that's averse to that, then getting them trapped in some like weird thing about the argument, obviously, I mean, if we stipulate X hypothesis that person is not going to be moved just by the empathy, then like they're not all of a sudden going to think that like there's this like empirical trap, or there's this there's just this trap all of a sudden. Well, is it just intelligence? Well, no, because there's like dumb humans or something like that. Like what? Like why could it be?
That's what happened in my experience. I mean, in my experience, I was like basically what you're describing.
Just think about it for a second. Like a lot of people will say something like intelligence. They'll point to that, and then they'll be like, "Oh, well, what about a holocaust of a human, a ton of humans?" And then what if someone says, "Oh, well, it's really just like for me, it's really just dumb non-human animals, right?" And so at that point, say, "Okay, so humans are off the menu, and so you can't just do the reductio on that anymore. Now it's just dumb non-human animals, which is basically where meat eaters are at anyway."
Yeah, but
right?
then there's things about like human. Then they'd be like, okay, well, if by human you just mean this, genetic setup, then like let's say hypothetically that someone scanned, there was a gene scanner that.
It doesn't have to do anything to do with genetics, right? Like your concept of a human can be
whatever
before.
the concept of the human is, like whatever it is, it's not hinging on like the genetic concept. Like whatever concept someone brings, then they could say, okay, well, what if they didn't meet those criteria? Like whatever criteria someone has to be a human, they can say, okay, well, what if this being didn't have those criteria? Then would you be okay with? So basically, the idea is like when someone says human, you just want to make sure that there's some sort of clarity. It doesn't have to be perfect clarity, but you don't want the word human to be used as some sort of word that creates this nebulous proposition cloud that the same.
It's just like a general. It's not just it's just a general understanding. Like if we figured out that like the people in fucking Zimbabwe had like radically different biology or something, we would still consider them humans.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so it's not like it's just the average concept. And what I'm saying is like I don't think like let's talk evolution.
Yeah, there's another reductio too. I mean, there's ways like so. For example, like in the future, where our offspring are at some point not going to be human. They won't be human by the biological species concept. They won't be human. They won't be morphologically human.
Well, yeah, but that's the point. It's just going to be some other concept. Like if we still think that there's personhood that applies to these beings or whatever, we're still just going.
Then you run into the question of why is personhood there in those beings and not the animals we're eating, or the mentally handicapped beings and not of those future beings and not the animals we're eating.
Well, yeah, but not having an answer to that question doesn't show that it's wrong, right?
No, we're not. Yeah, but we're not. Well, we would ask. Well, wait, Josh, 1 second. Well, we would ask. Is it okay to if someone were to procure one of those future humans, quote unquote humans, because they're not humans. If someone were to procure one of those beings in front of you, and say, is it okay to slaughter them if they were mentally handicapped?
Yeah, they'd probably say they. Well, look, if they were mentally handicapped, then I think that another a person who is already inclined to eat meat would just say yeah.
But okay. I have a different intuition than you. I think people who are already inclined to meat would say no.
Well, no, they just say they just say yeah, and that's because it's this like, it's like to them it's this completely alien species, you know. But if you could get,
Yeah,
but
go
if
ahead.
you if they were to say that if you were to say that, now change the hypothetical to say, well, maybe this is just one retarded one, but they have on average now on average they just have the same mental capacity as a cow. Then that's just going to be another thing for me as like that a meat eater's already going to be like, well, yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
But let
Now,
me
if
let
you
me just get clarity on that hypothetical. So like the average capacity, when you say their average capacity, you're saying like the average of whatever species they came from is
Yes.
like that?
Yes.
Okay. The average of the species they came from, yeah. So so that would be a different, so to be clear, are they saying that what makes the difference is being a member of a species that has an average capacity of this type of capability of intelligence or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that's would be a form of species normality, which is fine. They can name us a type of species normality form, but then we would just ask, okay, let's say it wasn't the case. Let's say now, so, you know, we found out upon further investigation, we found out that, you know, only so wait, I just want to get all the traits clear. So is it human conjunction species normality intelligence conjunction any other conjunctions or disjunctions?
No, I don't think so. I guess not.
Okay, human conjunction species normality intelligence. Okay. So let's say that we have let's say we have well, actually that would be an ancestor eating position technically. Someone can procure one of the hominid ancestors that weren't human.
Yeah, but listen, when you're doing that, it doesn't sound that absurd. Like, just take our closest living ancestor, the bonobo, or like the
It wouldn't
chimpanzee.
be it would well closest it wouldn't they wouldn't be our ancestors, and because none of our ancestors
Cousins,
share
whatever.
a common
Right.
ancestor.
Yeah. Yeah. The closest, so it's like bonobos or chimpanzees or whatever, right? You just talk about like.
Yeah, we could do chimpanzees, sure.
So do you think that like most people
They're
who like
omnivores, by the way.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even have to go. I wouldn't
So
actually have to go there. They would actually. It would also be just. They would also bite the bullet on their own ancestors. They would bite the bullet on.
Yeah, but you have to explain why that's absurd because like look, eventually if we go down on on the common ancestry tree, there's going to be something like I mean, I don't know how much the average intelligence has progressed.
Yeah, I
in,
can
like,
cut to the chase if you want, Josh. I mean, look, the chase I can cut to, and you can ask me why I don't cut to the chase in the first place. That's a fair question. But the cut to the chase is all these things are a sort of shell morality position, and by that I mean like it's not the intrinsic value of the being themselves of what they experience and what they don't experience. It's just like how many surrounding individuals around them is what's generating value for them. Like, so X amount of, so for the intelligence normality position, for example, you know, what's to me, this idea that, you know, if I see a, you know, mentally handicapped being and I ask like, why would it be absurd or not absurd to just start torturing this being? And someone offers an answer that, well, what's accounting for this difference is the number of intelligent beings of the same species surrounding this being.
right.
Yeah, I mean that those kind of answers, the answers that get subsumed under that umbrella, that kind of shell morality. It's like whether it be, you know, what toes they have or what cartilage they have or what, you know, what surrounding number of people they have, rather than have to do with the being themselves and the experience of that individual being themselves. That kind of seems weird to me.
Well, it can be the same. Look, the whole point is like look, what you can have different values, right? You can value the experience separately, and so you might think that because mentally handicapped people, you know, like if they were not part of the species, because you think that their experience is limited by their intelligence or whatever, then it would matter to you. But that's just to say that if you could divorce what matters to you from the human species, which it might just be the case that being part of your concept of a human is something that matters to you. It might not matter to you.
I agree with that. No, nothing I'm saying is yeah.
Well,
I agree with all that, Josh.
Right, but all I'm trying to say in that is that is that the average person is not going to think that that's absurd. That the fact that something is human matters to them. That's what's not going to be
Okay, so
absurd to them.
that's an empirical question, though. I mean, so I have a different. I think,
But you're the
I
one who's
think-
saying it's absurd, though.
Oh, when I say it's absurd, I'm well, no. When I say it, first of all, Isaac said it was absurd, but when I say it was absurd, to me, all I mean, that's not an empirical question. It's something that's very just verified by myself. I'm just saying, like, to me, that sounds crazy. That's all I'm saying. Now, someone could just say, well, it doesn't sound crazy to the other person, and that's fine. It boils down to a difference in values, and there's not much more I can say.
But listen, like, who in this chat does it sound crazy to? Because it certainly doesn't sound crazy to me, right? It doesn't sound crazy. Someone was just like, yeah, being a human matters to me. It matters to me too.
Oh, no.
I'm a fucking
That's mischaracterizing the position now. Okay, so that's
Wait,
not fair.
The
Yeah,
position
so-
that I laid out is not. I'm not mischaracterizing my position.
Wait, no. If what I'm saying is no, I'm talking about what I'm saying is crazy. What I'm saying is crazy is something that makes or breaks the difference of whether it's okay to take a conscious being and just start torturing is the number of individuals, of intelligent people, individuals that are of the same species surrounding it or not. And if there weren't that number of individuals, it would be okay to start torturing the being. And if it weren't that number of individuals, it would not be okay to start torturing the being. I think that's crazy. I have an intuition that most people would think that difference, making or breaking the difference between being okay and not okay to torture, would make
Here,
you crazy.
here again, you've said something different, right? Like, you've also included the word just torturing, right? As if that's not this. That's as if that's the same thing of having brutal methods of slaughter and then using their meat as product, right? Those
I
two
think-
things are not the same thing. Because if
Oh,
you
okay,
just
okay, sure. Well, that's fine. Yeah, I can say torture for the purpose of producing a hamburger from them or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, and so the point there is that,
But I still
like,
would
that's-
say the same thing. Yeah,
Right,
I would
but-
still have the same intuition.
but again, people already understand that animals are slaughtered, right? Like, they're already saying something like that. They're already saying, well, like, look, I mean, think about the average buffalo or cow or whatever. You know, if they thought on average there were these cows, or maybe even one, they might even think that if there was one cow that was like as smart as a human that could start raising objections, say, hey, why are you killing all these other fucking cows? If there was even one, then they might say that it's like, if they could like utter a proposition that it was clear to them that hey, look, you're killing all my brothers, this is not okay. A person might even think if there is even one of those, then it might be all off, right? That's certainly not. But there just happens to be not a single one of those. There's not a single cow capable of voicing its concerns, or even we don't even know if they can conceptualize death or any of those things. And maybe if there was even just one, that might matter. But the fact of the matter is that the average, and in the most cases, like, the smartest cow is going to be able to open up like a gate or something, you know, like, so like people are not really going to, you know, say, okay, yeah, I agree it can open a gate, but it's not like it can't conceptualize death. I don't think it has the breadth of this. I mean, it might just be out of empathy for the one thing that we stop killing the species. Or
Yeah, no,
people
I
could be
agree. I
outraged.
agree to most people. I agree with the intuition pump that for most people that would be a sufficient condition. But I'm just saying that there would maybe other sufficient that might not. I'm saying my intuition pump is that may not be the only sufficient.
Yeah, but think about what all I'm saying is that I'm not saying it's the only sufficient condition to make people reconsider eating animals. I wouldn't deign to say something like that, right? That just seems ridiculous. But
Well, can I just try to reproduce what you're saying and you tell me if I got you? So
Sure.
what you're saying essentially is, you know, you've gone through this whole iterative process. You've gotten down to the difference of valuation opinion, but people who are meat eaters would have that valuation anyway. Otherwise, they, you know, because they don't think it's absurd to eat meat, and they know that, you know, animals are not our species, and they know that animals are being slaughtered. And how is anything you're saying any different than just saying like, okay, well, you know, do you think it's absurd to eat meat, or do you think it's why don't you just start with that part? Because why would they ever say anything otherwise, based on any of the iterative process that you've gone through? Because you're just getting down to a valuation of a value that they clearly don't already share with you.
Yeah, which is just eating meat, right? I think that what the argument aims to show is that a person were they in their right mind would think that eating meat is crazy. That's what I think the argument aims
Yeah,
to
yeah.
show.
It aims to show that the process aims to show that if a person who is eating meat, upon it tries to show that upon reflection of their values, by teasing out what the entailments are of the stated values, it aims to show that their initial stated position is not in accord with their current position, and hopefully that they will realize that they will contract the menu rather than expand it.
But,
And
What about if
that's
the
not.
reasons
Don't
are
don't interrupt my
wait,
conversation.
hold on.
Don't interrupt my conversation. Sorry, but that's not exactly the same thing as like, getting people to commit to things like an infinite holocaust of retards or something like that, right? That's not the same thing, right? And I think it's important to point that out because maybe you can rhetorically trap someone until they're saying goofy things, right? Things that they don't actually believe, and it's because there have been these rhetorical tricks in place that got them to commit to crazy things. But I think that I don't think that's what people who eat meat actually are convinced of, right?
No,
I don't think.
I don't either. Although there are some people, I think when that happens, to be fair, I think there are some people that are really just sticking to their guns to avoid contradiction, and I don't. A lot of people, I don't think they're really telling the truth when they say some of those things. Like,
No,
I
but
don't.
listen, but listen, nothing I've said, right? You can't do the same things. Like, just take me as playing devil's advocate here, instead to have just been arguing for eating meat this entire time, just justifying my view,
Yeah,
eating
sure.
meat. I don't think anybody in this voice chat has come to the conclusion that I've said anything like that's even remotely comparable to me saying, "Oh yeah, I'm fine with holocausing a bunch of retards." And
Oh,
we could just set a vote to
well,
test
wait.
that.
Well, wait. I mean, look, this is going to be. I wouldn't. That's going to be a horrible empirical way of determining things. But anyway, besides that, if you say that what determines whether we can torture a being for making a hamburger of it or not, what makes or breaks the difference in this hypothetical is whether there are enough surrounding beings that share the species that are intelligent enough. I mean, my intuition pump is going to be that I think upon reflection, I think a lot of people are going to find that absurd.
Yeah, but that's just the position that animals are basically in right now.
Yeah, no, I
it's
understand. I get it. I get it. Yeah,
Yes.
I understand. Yeah, no, I get it. And there's something about framing it in that way, I think, that gets people to reflect on that. In which, if you were to just say, this is my intuition pump speaking, in which you were to just say, well, if you reflect on the animal situation, you know, would they have the same reflection of their moral values? And I don't think the answer is yes. And I think that's an empirical question that neither of us have the answer for.
Well, I don't care about the answer to the empirical question. I'll just ask you straightforwardly. Like you want to say my hypothetical position that I'm taking as a hypothetical meat eater, where I just think it's okay insofar as I just think it's okay insofar as there's not at least one member of that species that can conceptualize death or has like this robust sense of pain that we have. That there's not even a single member, and as long as let's say that that's the condition, there's not a single member of that species that can look at it and say, "Hey, look, those are my brothers. I don't know how much of them are like that, whatever." If that and saying, "Yeah, it's okay to kill those people because that's basically, or kill those beings because that's basically where we're at in when it comes to animals," you're just saying there that you think it's absurd, on your view, to kill animals, right? And that's basically the same position as I think it's acceptable to kill animals.
Well, it would be something that. Well, what I'm saying is, I think it's absurd to say that what makes or breaks the difference between being okay and not being okay with killing a being would be its surroundings, like of that nature. Now, it follows from that it's absurd to kill animals. I agree, but I'm not. It's not the same thing as me just saying it's absurd to kill animals. It may be an entailment of me saying that. I agree, but it's not the same thing as me just saying that.
Yeah, but I'm asking. But I don't understand what the functional difference is, right?
Yeah, so I
Because
think the functional difference is going to be an empirical one. Like it's just going to be an empirical question. I can give it to you. My functional difference, I think, is going to be just its effectiveness at convincing certain people. And the reason I think that way is because it was effective because I've been experiences to both ways, and I was convinced by the name of the trade route. So
I'm
that's all.
just trying to say that like you put people in a position. Let's say that let's say that like the whole point of being absurd is that it's like something to scoff at, because people
Yeah.
are just like, oh yeah, if you just take a bunch of blind people, you can chain them up and like cut their throats, and everybody's just like, well, yeah, that's a really ridiculous moral position. Yeah, no one would ever handle it. But I'm saying forget that. Right? Say someone is even ambivalent about the position I'm getting. Say, oh, that's really hard to think about. Maybe does it really matter that there's these surrounding factors, or is it just the experience? That person who's ambivalent clearly doesn't think it's just absurd in the way like killing a bunch of like blind people or like like choking them out or whatever. They clearly don't think it's absurd in that level, even the ambivalent person. But then take the person who's not ambivalent. What are you going to say to that person? He's just like, yeah, I think that those things matter. Other people are just going to be like, I mean, your view is that other people are going to look at that and just be like, oh yeah, that's fucking obviously, it's obviously the case that those things don't matter whatsoever. This person is just a joke. It's ridiculous. I mean, that kind of thing, like,
people, I acknowledge people can take ambivalent positions there. I would say on my view, I think it would be crazy to even be ambivalent in the situation I described. But that's just, and I do have the intuition pump that upon reflection that a lot of people as well, I think even most people would say it would be, it would be even crazy to be ambivalent.
dude, I'm a vegan. I don't even have that position.
Okay, we have different positions. It's okay, Josh. All right.
But what I don't get is why? Why is that so ridiculous to you that a person could be divided in that way?
No,
mean,
I understand. I'm not. Well, it's not. Okay, just to be clear, like it's not. If when you ask it, it's ridiculous to see a person be divided in that way. I'm not saying that. I'm denying that there could be it could be a fact of the matter that it turns out that upon all that required reflection, that people are going to be divided in that way. I acknowledge that's an empirical possibility. But if I had to bet my life on it, I don't think that would end up being the case for most people. But that's just my intuition pump, but I don't have data for that, and I don't think you do either. The reason why, to answer your question, is why I think this way, is because I had very similar intuitions to the intuitions you're describing, and I've been exposed to the slaughterhouse footage, and I've been exposed to... Wait, hold on, let me finish. I've been exposed to the slaughterhouse footage. I've been exposed to all the things you're telling me that should be just as effective at convincing one.
I didn't say any of it. I didn't say any of it.
Wait a minute.
I didn't hear anyone either.
Wait, someone said, wait. Well, sorry. So it wasn't you, it was someone else. I'm sorry. Someone else said about this.
I didn't actually hear anyone.
No,
Me neither.
someone.
It doesn't matter. Just
doesn't matter.
move on.
Okay,
I didn't say
Okay,
that.
yeah, sure. I've been experienced to someone just questioning my values about animals and questioning my values about, okay, well, what do you value about the animals? What do you not value about the animals? Is it, and I've tried all the answers for like, okay, well, it's the intelligence, it's human though, human in conjunction with something else though. I've tried all of that, as you've said, and I maintain that position. Except yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I just want
Yeah.
I just want one concession from all of this, right? And
Yeah, what's the concession?
that concession is this: that a person who's ambivalent
Mhm.
about that, or even a person who falls on the opposite side of that, who doesn't think it's absurd, that's not at all as like rhetorically powerful or anything as when you say, oh, so you think it's fine, or getting someone to commit to the position where like, oh, you could just take a bunch of blind people and torture them for 1,000 years and you're okay with that, right? Like, it's not.
Oh yeah. If someone, yeah, like the way I'm talking about it now, I agree. If someone can get, there's a lot of rhetorical power. I agree. There's a lot of rhetorical power if someone can have their position shown to be like, okay, well, you're just committed to slaughtering a whole bunch of blind people, a whole bunch of like mentally handicapped people, et cetera, et cetera. Like I'm being very like, yeah, if someone is really good copying it, and I'm saying, okay, well, there's, this sort of the way you've described it. I don't think it's as rhetorically powerful. Sure.
But I'm just saying, bad cop the shit out of me right now. I'll get anyone to fucking bad cop the shit out of me. They won't be able to. They won't be able to hold their fucking ground. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, really? I mean, okay. I mean, look, I think I could. I'm not. I'm a good cop, to be honest with you. But I think we could have a conversation. Yeah. But anyone who knows me knows that I'm not really a bad cop. But
Right.
yeah. But wait, hold on. But yeah. I mean, I think I definitely. If so, you take the view that all that matters, you could is in terms what makes or breaks the difference between torturing some being for a hamburger, is the number of surrounding people. No, I do have. Yeah, I mean that does. I mean, you could have an infinite amount of them, and you could torture an infinite amount of those people for hamburgers. And that's just that's absurd. I would say that's ridiculous. You're torturing an
But to
infinite.
me, that's just this. But to me, that's basically you're just constructing the hypothetical the way I've said it. You're just constructing the hypothetical to where we're basically in. You have a different species, a new thing that you've concocted hypothetically, whatever. And that's basically, insofar as my position is concerned, identical to cows, and I'm already okay with eating cows, so that's not a problem for me.
But then,
I
but
just
notice
think it's
what you
okay to
said.
eat cows.
But then notice, here's the issue there, Josh. Though, but then notice that you're trying to say that there's a symmetry breaker between that rhetorical power and the rhetorical power of another context, where someone's like, okay, well, you're gonna kill a whole bunch of people. Like someone who is okay with killing a whole bunch of humans would say, okay, well, that's not powerful against me. That's not rhetorical powerful against me because I already had that position in the first place. Just like you're saying, you already had the position in the first place killing cows. So I don't see why you're trying to make a symmetry breaker.
But again, like I agree, I would agree with you that if someone
But then
had
you try to get a concession out of me that wasn't the case. You try to get a concession out of me that it's more rhetorically powerful against the person who's saying that who's committed to the position of just killing a bunch of blind people.
yeah,
Than your position. But the person who's committed to killing a bunch of blind people could say the same thing you're saying right now. The person who's committed to killing a bunch of blind people can just say, "Well, that's the position I started with in the first place."
because no, that's not the position that they started out in the first place, right? And that's the whole thing that makes it rhetorically powerful, is because the position they started out in the first place was that it's okay to eat meat. That's the position.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So but it's not the position. Yeah, but that's not the. No. But then you have the same problem the other way around, because I don't take it to be the case that's saying it's okay to torture for the sake of a hamburger, depending on whether or not there are a number of intelligent people surrounding that individual, to be the same thing as saying it's okay to eat meat. It may follow that it's okay to eat meat from that. It's one of the positions that follow it's okay to eat meat, but it's not equivalent. It's not the same thing.
Well, it's like, let's say the reason that rationalizes my action to eat meat is the same as the reason that would rationalize my action to eat the hypothetical person that you're talking about. Then to me, yes, it is the same.
Yeah, but then
right?
the person who's okay with eating, torturing the blind people would say the same thing. They would say, "Oh well, my reason for being okay with torturing the blind people is my reason for eating the cows. So therefore, it is the same."
Yeah, but the difference there is that we're not taking that as a given, that the person is already comfortable.
I'm not taking it as a given in your case either. I'm not taking it. I don't take it as a given that someone's okay.
That's not true. That's not true. If you went into an argument with someone who eats meat, you're starting with the presupposition that that person has a negative attitude towards. Because if you started with that question, oh, do you think it's okay to just take a bunch of blind people and go and fucking Holocaust them or whatever, the answer to that would be no. That's the auspices that you start under, right?
Yeah, but I have the same auspices. I have the same auspices for the other case. I have the same auspices that the person, if they were posed the question, if they have a mentally handicapped person, what determines whether it's okay or not okay to torture that person for a hamburger is whether they're surrounded by a whole bunch of mentally handicapped beings. The auspices I start with in that case is that of course it wouldn't be. Of course they wouldn't take that position. It's the same thing.
That's like the same thing as saying that you're under the auspices that they don't rationalize their actions towards eating meat.
Okay, no, I disagree with that. I don't agree with that. I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I don't see it as the same. And I'm asking for the symmetry breaker. I'm not hearing it.
the symmetry breaker between what? The
Yeah,
symmetry
why
breaker.
is it the same thing as saying it's eating meat in one case but not in the other case? Why is it the same thing? So if you're going to say that if someone is saying if someone is okay with eating meat, look, let me just ask you this question. If someone's okay with eating meat, is it entailed on their view that the difference between being okay and not being okay with torturing a mentally handicapped individual is how many intelligent individuals are surrounded by that being?
Yeah, or whether or not they identify with that being in some way, like they're part of a human, because like there might be a bunch of other retarded humans that.
So someone can't have the view if they reject that view, they can't have the view that it's okay to eat meat.
Wait, what?
Look, the question is, you said it's the person is, if the person has this view, they're going to have the same view, like it's like a biconditional. Is that right? Like it's like they affirm it in both cases, or they're going to reject it in both cases. That's what I take it to be. They're going to. So if someone says that I am okay with the only difference being with the torture case is the intelligent beings of the same species surrounding them, that they're going to take the same view with eating meat. So if they're not okay, they're going to be not okay with both. They're going to be okay with. They're going to be okay with them both. Now I don't see how that would be. Yeah, but I don't see how that would be prima facie true. I can fully envision how people would say one and not the other. There wouldn't be a biconditional.
Well, I'm not saying. I'm not saying anything like. Look, let me explain like the difference, because this is what I'm talking about the absurd claim, right? Because I think a lot hinges on this, and the notion of absurdity here doesn't have to do with this analysis that I've given. What it has to do with is this claim that if I present this analysis to a lot of people, like even all the people in the chat, or I could even go into Ask Yourself or whatever, they're going to say, yeah, I basically sympathize with it, because that's basically, you've just given an analysis to why I think eating meat is acceptable, right? That's what I'm going to say is, I think is the general case. Now, what's not the general case is that if I go up and ask the questions that I'm asking to any random person, any sample set of what I said, that they're probably going to say, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of up in the air for me. They might even be ambivalent. They might say, yeah, well, it could be kind of fucked up, but it's definitely not like absurd to think that, right? It's definitely not like, I wouldn't balk at it the way if you said, oh, well, if you just went up to a random person and you said, do you think that it's okay to torture blind people for hundreds and hundreds of years? They're just going to say, no, of course not, right? That's the symmetry breakers.
Okay, so are you saying, so let me see if I could repeat what you're saying. So are you saying that there's a difference in the potency of like absurdity with respect to what most people would consider absurd? That's, some reductios, depending on what the person's position is, may carry more potent reductio than others. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in one case, you're going to be able to socially humiliate someone, in another, you won't.
Okay. So I'm open to the possibility. No, I'm certainly open to the possibility that some reductios would be more potent than others. But I do think that there would be reductios in. My intuition is that there would be reductios in the non-vegan justifications. But I'm open to the fact that not all of those reductios are equally potent. Sure.
But part of what makes it a reductio, is the capacity for social humiliation.
Right. That's why I'm okay. Right. But that's why I'm okay, and that's why I'm admitting this is not a problem for me. Like, I'm admitting that yes, some will have like a great amount of social humiliation, and some might have a moderate amount of social humiliation. I'm okay with a spectrum.
Well, I don't think, like, in this conversation, I mean, I think I could go out and eat a fucking hamburger. You haven't done shit to me. Like, certainly none of these people are even remotely moved. And I'm not even saying, like, they could play devil's.
This is just you like talking about like this is just you talking about like empirics now. Like, that's an empirical question. Whether if we had a debate,
but it's an empirical question. Just say. Listen, part of social humiliation is not an empirical question, right? Part of it is just I can acknowledge whether or not I feel humiliated, right? Maybe I might not have an honest disposition to do that to you, but you can just think to yourself about the inference to the best explanation about what I feel right now, right? I don't feel, I mean, let's say hypothetically I'm a meat eater. I mean, you know that I'm not, right? Let's say hypothetically I'm a meat eater. I wouldn't feel any ounce differently than I feel right now. I don't feel any humiliation, right? And I do think that if a vast majority of the people in here, like if I went into a vegan community or whatever, I would feel a lot of social humiliation. But given that the average person is not a vegan, right, which is something that you accept, and I were to give these responses in the average case, then it's very unlikely that I would feel social humiliation. And I like to think that a lot of people are set up like me. So there is one part that's not up to discussion. That's how I feel, right, about the situation. And I already know if I'm around a bunch of other non-vegans, which it happens to me on a daily basis, I'm around people like in my work and all of that shit, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I mean, I'll try to talk to them about like eating meat sometimes, and I'll just be like, oh, I don't think it's very good. But if I tried to like start arguing with them, and all of them were like looking at me like I was a ridiculous fucking person, that would make me feel social humiliation. And so there's a part of it that's not necessarily empirical. I'm saying right now, if it came down to this debate and the amount of humiliation I felt in this debate,
Well, I'm not debating. Listen, I'm not trying. Like, my goal here is not to debate you or humiliate you.
No, I'm just yeah, but that's not the spirit of what I'm saying, right? Like the spirit of what I'm saying is
you're saying if we were, and I did try to humiliate you, like this. There's certain positions that wouldn't succeed in humiliating you, while there are other positions that would. Is that what?
I would leave this shit unscathed, and I'd be eating hamburgers, right?
Yeah, if okay, yeah, I get it. I
and I don't, and now this is the empirical part, which I don't think anybody who does eat meat in this chat would not just try to avail themselves of the same defense that I have and would feel basically the same way. I mean, this is what I'm saying. This is basically how I think that people who eat meat think.
Yeah, and I when I ate meat, I did think that way too. Except I did feel humiliated with myself when I ran into Name the Trade. So maybe there's clearly at least some people who do. So yeah, maybe it wouldn't work for a whole bunch of people. Maybe for a lot of people it would feel unscathed, but I certainly didn't. I was so at least I know that for myself.
But the absurdity, what the point is that the absurdity turns on the social.
To myself, it was absurd.
No, but I'm saying that when the whole point of the Holocaust thing is being absurd, all that stuff, and Isaac saying, oh, well, most people, it doesn't resonate with most people's values, and all that shit, all that bullshit that he says there, with that notion of absurdity, that turns on the capacity for social humiliation. That's what I'm saying, right? Because without that, it just wouldn't be absurd. It's like saying that people who are, let's say 50 people are 50-50 on a hard issue, and you take one half of that issue and the other half, it's just like...
Let me just ask you this. Okay, let me just ask you this. Let's say instead of using the word absurd, let's say we just said, like, that's if we suspect that upon reflection may not be in accord with your true values if you really thought about it. Like, would you have, like, an issue with that? Like, instead of saying absurd. Like if I just replace the word absurd with that.
No. So I think that I think that there could be a good argument to be run there, and I think that this is probably the argument that should be run, which is that there's something that it's like to live the most fulfilled life, and you can use empirical studies for this. And you could say that if you came to be as fulfilled in a vegan lifestyle as you were, if you came to be enjoy your life the same way you enjoyed your life as a meat eater, if you came to the end of those two lives and you looked back at it and you had the capacity to enjoy it both, you would look at the one and say, that's a better life, right? I'm glad that I lived the vegan life. That's an argument. That's an argument to the effect that I think what you're saying when you say it probably doesn't resonate with your deepest values. And that's an argument I think could be made and would be a good argument.
Okay, because
Isn't
here's the
that
thing,
the
like
aesthetic realist argument?
because
Similar to that.
here's the thing, like I have no commitments to the word absurd. Like this is a conversation you should really have with Isaac, and I'd be happy to listen in. And he's actually reached out to you to continue this conversation, Josh. So I don't have any commitments to the word absurd. Like if I don't like, to me, name the trait doesn't like hinge on demonstrating a quote unquote absurdity. Like if I'm happy replacing absurd with the equivalent of
Personally objectionable.
like
Right,
personally objectionable. Like if you reflected on your own values deeply and honestly, like you probably
But what
would.
I'm trying,
Yeah, go ahead.
right, that's fine. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the antinomy hinges on that rhetoric, right? That's the thing that fucking pisses me off about it, and I think that that's what pisses me off when other people use it on other people. Is that type of antinomy there? It just
Wait, what
seems
do
like
you mean when you? Can you just elaborate? Like, what do you mean when you say that? Like the antinomy.
the thing that makes it contentious, right? That's the thing that makes it really that's the thing that really irritates me, and I really makes it irritating is that, oh, people are just saying, oh, it's absurd. I've reduced you to absurdity. This is ridiculous. This is
Okay,
absurd.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So your whole issue with it is the absurd part.
Yeah, that is what makes it. It's not like it's like this problem where like, oh, I don't have a problem with people reflecting on their values or anything like that. Again, I'm a vegan. I have sympathies towards vegans. I don't think that anybody should eat meat. I think it's fucked up, right? Or animals are tortured. That's fucked up. That's all I have to say. But I don't like it because I've been a meat eater. I've spent most of my life eating meat. My girlfriend eats meat. There are tons of other people who I know that eats meat. I don't want to go around saying that they're just absurd. And I certainly wouldn't want to straw man their position to say, oh, they're actually committed to, like, what they're actually committed to is that they would just go and stab and slaughter a bunch of blind people willy-nilly, right? Like that argument gets people into, like people who don't have experience debating it, they get into binds like that, and they think that they're actually committed to that. That to me, it's just a fucking farce, and it pisses me off.
Yeah,
You agree that, well, there may be some people who really are committed to that based on what they've said, but I agree that there may be some people who run the argument that on someone who's not committed to that falsely say that.
But listen, I'll just ask you a question. Where do you think the probability distribution lies? If you just ask, like, tell them the thing that you get them to commit to at the end of the discussion. Ask them that at the first part of the discussion, right? And tell me what percentage of those people do you think will agree with the thing that you eventually get them to commit to?
Yeah, hypothetically, if I asked in the beginning, probably very little. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like 95%.
Probably not. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, sure.
Right, and so that's what makes it.
But then the question is, why do they? The question would be then, why did they say something? But then what's the issue with like just saying, hey, like you've just said this, like clearly, like what if I just said like, hey, you've named this as the trait. I just want to point out to you that if that's the only necessary and sufficient trait, if that's what you're saying, then it would entail this, and it seems like, you wouldn't really agree with that. Like, would there be an issue if I run that sort of dialectic with someone? Would you take issue with that?
No.
Okay.
No. It's really just this. It's really just like I said. It's the whole rhetorical game, because like obviously the person doesn't. I mean, like even when you ask them that question, they say it, right? A person who's thought about this would think, oh well, they can't really mean that. I mean, if you took the principle of charity, you would think to yourself, oh well, they can't really mean that, right? Like that's what you would think.
No, I mean, I would think that. Although you'd be surprised at how many people really do like.
I'm not surprised at the number of people that dig their fucking heels in. I talked to Brenda, for fuck's sake.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that maybe, and look, Josh,
I sort of actually don't understand why Josh, like let's say in the case of Gigi, for instance, right? Like that's personally obviously love or whatever, and right, if he genuinely like thought that a vegan lifestyle would be better for her or something, right? And he thought that sort of the social humiliation that may be produced by deceiving her was like had a veganizing effect on her, like why would it really matter that it's like a farce or deceptive?
Well, I don't know why that shit just bothers me. That just bothers me sort of. I just don't like that shit. I don't like any of that. It really pisses me off. I mean, I might be willing to deal with it if it were clear that ended up veganizing her or whatever. For example, I might be willing to put up with shit I don't like if it was really empirically borne out that was likely to occur. Although I don't think it's like overwhelmingly likely. Like it's not the case that it's just like 99% of the fucking people who run you run the name of the trade of them all of a sudden they're vegan or something like that. And I'm also not convinced that the set of people that you run name the trait on wouldn't have just been converted by other means. They didn't already have those sympathies. They weren't already capable. And so
there's clearly some people. There's clearly some people who fall into that category.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe, but I mean,
I think I fall into that category.
I'm just talking about like for me because Young asked me a question specifically about Godless, right? Okay. I would be able to put up with the bullshit if it turned out that was the way to veganize Godless, for example. I would, but it would because I do think it's like a greater good, right? But it doesn't change the fact that I would still be bothered that those means had to be used at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, look. I mean, I think. Look, I personally, I'm personally not. I don't really have any commitments to the word absurd. Like, and I think maybe there's an element of self-selection because I think a lot of times in the name of the trait discussions, we run into a lot of people like Brenda who dig their heels in the sand, and that might have something to do. Where but I don't know. That's just me speculating. But I would like you to. If you want to have the conversation with Isaac, because if you think he's more committed to it, I don't know if he's committed to it. But yeah, I'd be happy to listen into that conversation. I think the two of you should have that conversation, because he does want to know if you have any objections. But if your objection is just with name the trait is just with the word absurd, then first of all, I'd just like to point out that this is not the objection that Timber had at all. So you and Timber were not talking about the same thing. That's one thing.
It's not just the word absurd. It's not just the word absurd, right? Like that's mischaracterization. It's all the things that go into it. People perceiving it as absurd, and the whole. Like what I take to be dishonesty when intellectually dishonesty when someone names a trait and you actually know that in all likelihood they don't actually think that that's sufficient, but you're just going to run with it and assume that it's sufficient for them, right? I don't like that.
Let me ask you. Let's say I said if someone names a trait, I say when you say this is the trait, are you saying it's necessary trait or are you saying it's necessary and sufficient trait? Like let's say I clarified that before. Like before, like delivering a reductio, like let's say I were to say like, okay, is it a sufficient trait or is there something else? Like you can name multiple traits.
No, I think look, the ideal conversation, if you were even to engage with this at all, it would be to provide what I just provided, and say, now what do you think about that, right?
Yeah,
and then ask the person whether or not they think that's acceptable, and maybe make them feel ambivalent about that. It's to give like what the strongest possible interpretation.
Yeah, it's just charity. I take it to be like you probably looked. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like you've probably seen a lot of vegans run name the trait in a very uncharitable manner. And by uncharitable I mean like say they name a trait, they interpret it right off the bat as a necessary and sufficient trait without clarifying it when it could have just been a necessary trait, or they say, okay, well then you believe it's okay to kill like these blind people, even though it's like they may not have just realized. They clearly don't. Like anyone you're interpreting it charitably says they don't believe that, and it's just something that they haven't like connected the dots maybe. And the better way of saying that would be like, hey, maybe you might want to rethink about that, or maybe you don't really think that that's all there is to it, because if that's what there is to it, then this entailment would follow, and you don't believe that, right? Like if someone had that kind of conversation.
Yeah, that's a better conversation to have.
Okay, so one thing. So now I'm clear on that. I would be. I don't know what planet I'm on. If that was what Timber's objection was, I'm on a different fucking planet. Like, because that was not Timber's objection at all.
Well, no,
Yeah.
Timber was saying was the same thing that I was saying, which is basically you can just give a set of conditions that make them practically, for all intents and purposes, the same as like just a new animal species, and then you're just asking them if they think it's absurd to eat animals, or you're telling them it is absurd to eat animals. I just
I
took it-
didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I heard a lot more than that, but all right. I mean, I heard like the problems about going in the other direction, problems about like expanding the menu. The problem is like that they were like I don't even know. Like, okay, but this is good. This is a clear conversation. It doesn't seem like this is all over the place. Okay, so yeah, I mean, look, I've probably been like, I'll tell you right now, Josh. Like, there have probably been cases in the past where I was not charitable with other people when running Name the Trade on them. I think some of that may be a product of like having so many people come to the server who are basically Brendas and dig their heels in the sand. Like, oh yeah, of course I believe it's okay to just slaughter a bunch of humans. Like, why would you think otherwise? Of course, it's not absurd at all. It's not absurd to me. Like, yeah, there are so many people like that who come in and just dig their heels in the sand and be like, yeah, that's really what I mean.
Or that you just feel strongly about veganism. That you could just explain.
Well, yeah, well,
you
that
can't
could
do
be.
it
It
by
could
any
be.
means possible.
Yeah, but now that we're now that we're on the topic of being charitable, Young, like maybe we could be charitable to me as well, and say maybe the motivations are are
No,
maybe.
I'm just saying that like I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it could be. It could be that as well. I don't know exactly why it is, but I do think I try to have the type of conversations that Josh is just. I do think when I run Name the Trait that, you know, I'd like to think at least that I've made a change from the past, of some of the past things, of the way uncharitable interpretations of my opponents, and have tried to be more charitable and have tried to had a more more benefit of the doubt type of conversation, and that's the way I try to run it. I can't speak to how other people run it, but that's what I try to do. And sometimes I am out of accord with those values, and sometimes I'm in accord with those values. But that is my goal.
So, I mean, I sort of, I don't know if I have like enough time to go through it and all, but I came into the room because I guess it had been said to me that you were saying that what was happening yesterday with the debate sort of conversation that I had with Isaac is that there was like some sort of misunderstanding of the reductio that he had given me. I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not. Oh, first of all, I'm not sure you said that the person.
Wait, what was said that I said?
That you were saying that what was going on in the conversation between me and Isaac yesterday about that one reductio is that I wasn't understanding the reductio.
No, I never said that. No, you clearly. I said the opposite exactly. I said you absolutely understood the reductio.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would say that.
Do you personally understand about that? Like, what's supposed to like sort of follow from that reductio, or sort of what the connection is supposed to be to the previous part of the dialectic? Because I'm not.
Are you talking about the specific case that? Yeah. So the specific case, the specific reductio, which I believe you assented to, is that if someone says that all that matters, is that at the point value drops off is when the cow has the properties of a cow, except for the human skin and the human nipples.
Yeah.
Then what follows is that it would not be okay to slaughter that being if they had some piece of human cartilage, right?
No, not that. I was talking about that was the reductio that you gave me.
Yeah, that was the reductio. Oh, are you talking about the reductio Isaac gave?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, if you okay, so like I said before, like you guys really should all have this conversation with Isaac because I was playing Warcraft when Isaac gave that conversation.
Yeah.
And yes, it was retail Warcraft for those. I'm not playing classic WoW. Sorry.
Hey guys, Avi's already stated that he no longer wants to discuss name of the trait or
I
ask
I
yourself.
stated that like hours ago, and it didn't stop anyone. Honestly, like at this point, like I'm just bored of it. No, I'm not
Yeah.
playing like whoever's in the chat. Like I'm not playing classic. I played classic when I was playing vanilla WoW, like back in 2004.